So, hello everyone. Welcome to our video today where we're talking about biology chapter 3, embryonic development, as well as the menstrual cycle. So, we're going to start with the menstrual cycle, okay? So, first, we have a brief overview that just helps keep a couple of the steps straight in your head. So, we have the hypothalamus that stimulates GnRH, which stimulates the anterior pituitary to release FSH and LH, where FSH helps develop the follicle, and LH, which causes ovulation. Excuse me, and those hormones act on the ovaries, which cause estrogen and progesterone to be released and act on the uterus. And so that's just the outline of what happens. And we have these steps here that we're going to go over as well. Let me go on this side. So we have, sorry about that. So first we have the ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle. So the ovarian cycle is what's occurring in your ovaries, and the uterine cycle is occurring in the uterus. So the ovarian cycle, first we have a follicular phase, and this is where the follicle matures and prepares for the egg to be released. This is triggered by increased FSH, and the increase of FSH causes an increase of estrogen from the follicle, okay? So as we said, the follicle is maturing and prepping the egg to be released. Then we have ovulation, which is triggered by an increase in LH, which causes even more LH to be produced, and a decrease in estrogen. So this drop of estrogen that we see on a graph of the menstrual cycle would be at the point of ovulation. Because ahead of this, at the follicular phase, you have an increase of estrogen, but as soon as the ovulation occurs, the estrogen drops. Then you have the luteal phase, and the luteal phase lasts 14 days, and it creates the corpus luteum, which is the empty follicle. And now that the egg has been released, ovulation has occurred, now you have a corpus luteum, which is the empty follicle that will increase the progesterone levels. And so if you're not pregnant, the progesterone and estrogen levels will drop right away. And then this causes an increase in GnRH, and for this cycle to start over again. Now, at the same time, this was again in your ovaries, but at the same time, your uterus plays a role in this menstrual cycle. So the uterine cycle specifically, first we have menstruation, and this is when we have low estrogen and progesterone, and you shed off the endometrium, okay? And that's when we know women get their periods, approximately once a month, as they're shedding this endometrium lining. Because it's, if you're not pregnant, there's no need for you to maintain or try to, have this, all these nutrients and things like that in your uterus. If you're not pregnant, it gets released. And then we have the proliferative stage, which increases estrogen and starts rebuilding the endometrium. Okay, so now another month's coming. Now we need to rebuild the endometrium in case this month we're getting pregnant. And then in between the proliferative stage and the secretory phase, you will, ovulation is occurring in your ovaries. So I just want to make a point here of where these cycles kind of connect. So yes, this ovulation would occur here between the proliferative and the secretory phase. So this was kind of an overview. It would help to also look at a graph of this. There's plenty of graphs online. You can just look at the increase of these hormones and the drop and kind of follow along with these steps. But I tried to make it as simple as possible so you can really try to understand what's going on. So now we also have stem cells, which is important to talk about which is important to touch on when we talk about embryonic development. So we have stem cells. Blastocytes are embryonic stem cells. Then we have totipotent cells, which can be any type of cell. Totipotent, total, any type of cells, okay? Then we have pluripotent, which in French, plusieurs means many, right? So plusieurs means any cell except for the placenta. So that one's easy to remember as well. Pluripotent could be any type of cell except for the placenta, okay? Then we have multipotent cells, which are a little more specialized, but they can also be multiple types of cells. Another important thing is just cell signaling here. So we have autocrine, which is these drawings kind of help a little bit. So we have autocrine, paracrine, which is signaling something else, juxtacrine, and endocrine. So those are the types of cell signaling that was briefly mentioned in this chapter as well. And then we have, down here we have some important words. I'm going to try to move this down just a tad. Not sure if you can see it, but I'll read it for you. So we have determination, which is when a cell commits to becoming a certain type of cell. So the cell, when it's determination, it's committed, okay? Then we have differentiation, which occurs after determination. And this is when you selectively transcribe certain genes that are appropriate for the cell's specific function that cell is determined to be. Then we have induction, which is when a group of cells influences the fate of surrounding cells. That's a lot of the time mediated by inducers. Okay, so now we're on to this fun part here. We have a lot to cover here in pink, but there's all important steps when it comes to embryonic development. So the first thing, I'm going to go to fertilization, but the first thing we're going to look at is just in between these two lines right here. So here we have a decaryon, which is one cell with two nuclei, which means that the egg has only gone through meiosis 1, okay? Which is then going to produce the second polar body and an oocyte. Then you have this oocyte, and now syngamy occurs, which is when the egg and the sperm nuclei fuse, and that produces a zygote. Okay, so to produce from this zygote, you have to have fertilization because you have the egg and the sperm nuclei fusing. So now you have a zygote. So how that fertilization occurs, we're just going to move up here now. Fertilization occurs in the fallopian tubes. It's when the acrosomal region of a sperm, okay, has a lot of digestive enzymes, and those enzymes penetrate the corona radiata and the zona pellicula of the egg. So this is kind of a drawing up here. So this part right here is the egg. We have the zona pellicula around it, and then these are the sperm. So the heads of the sperm have digestive enzymes. So when it comes close to this zona pellicula, it can digest that barrier really and get to the egg. And so as soon as that occurs, we need to make sure that only one sperm is able to fertilize per egg, right? Even though there's many, many sperm trying to get to that egg. And so how we do that is there's a slow block and a fast block. So the fast block is the egg very quickly depolarizes. And then a slow block, to also block polyspermy, is increasing the calcium ion concentration. And that means that this causes the zona pellicula to harden and separate from the rest of the egg. And then that way the other sperm won't be able to get to the egg because it's separated. So those two things ensure that only one sperm fertilizes one egg. Okay, so once we have our zygote, right? And the zygote is a diploid fusion of egg and sperm. So now we take our zygote. The zygote turns into a two-stage cell, and then a four-stage cell, and so on. And then we get to a morula. And the morula is a solid mass of cells. Okay, and I did talk about this just so you get an idea where this is coming from. The most important is definitely these steps that we're going over, but I just wanted to let you know where this zygote is actually coming from, okay? So you can see the zygote. We went through fertilization right here, the egg and the sperm fusing, got us a zygote. Now the zygote has increased in size, and now it's a solid mass of cells with an increased surface area. And at this time, the morula gets carried to the uterus, because we were fertilized in the fallopian tubes. And then what actually implants in the endometrium lining is a blastula. And the blastula has kind of an outer layer and an inner layer. So the inner mass of cells actually begins to form the embryo, while the outer layer is called the trophoblast. And the trophoblast secretes HCG, which prolongs the length of the corpus luteum, and this actually becomes the placenta for the baby. And HCG is also one of the first hormones that get tested for in a pregnancy test. So that's how you know this is occurring, is by the secretion of this hormone. Okay, so now that we have our blastula, now it goes to gastrulation. And what happens in gastrulation is the development of the primary germ layers. So first we have the ectoderm layer. The ectoderm layer gives form to the nervous system, the skin, the hair, the mouth, the nails, anus, and the sweat glands. So ectoderm, think of atractoderm, the things on the outside, so your hair, your nails, things like that, as well as the nervous system is important to remember, and the sweat glands, okay? Then we have the mesoderm, which will give to the uterus wall, the heart, the kidney, the musculoskeletal system, the circulatory system, gonads, and the adrenal cortex. Those things all come from the mesoderm layer. And I honestly just had to memorize the list of these things that came from each of these germ layers. Then finally we have the endoderm, which gives to the GI tract, the respiratory system, the inner linings of your stomach and things like that, the inner linings, the liver, the pancreas, and endocrine glands. Okay, so now we have our 3 primary germ layers. So then we have neurulation, and neurulation is where the mesoderm can develop the notochord, and the ectoderm the ectoderm, then, you know how we said it was developing the nervous system? So we do that by the notochords, which will become the spinal cord, and then the ectoderm, so it has neural folds. So the neural folds will then turn into neural crest, and then the peripheral nervous system and the neural folds also will turn into a neural tube and form the central nervous system. Oh, you can't really see that down there. Let me just go in a little closer so you can see. Hopefully you can see that. So ectoderm to neural folds to neural tube, and neural folds also to neural crest and peripheral nervous system. And of course, neural tube gives to the CNS. Okay. So we're almost done here. I know it's a lot of information. But when you go over it, hopefully it'll start to make sense. And then finally we have our fetal stage, which lasts a long time in the pregnancy. One thing I did want to point out that I didn't have written on the board, but just some checkpoints for the different weeks. So at 12 weeks, you can determine the gender. At 16 weeks, the muscle contraction of the baby will be felt by the mother. At 24 weeks, the eyelids unfuse and the baby will respond to external stimuli. At 28 weeks, if it's a male, the testes will descend. At 33 weeks, the surfactant is formed, and that's really important in respiration. And then at 38 weeks is considered a full term. And so labor is triggered by a couple of things. So for one, when the placenta begins to deteriorate, so the baby, isn't getting the nutrients it needs from the placenta anymore because that's ready to come out. The uterus is stretched as far as it can stretch, and when the baby's head is down. So that's how you know that is what triggers labor. Then there's also some postpartum changes as well. And one other important thing to note is that fetal hemoglobin has an increased affinity for oxygen, because it's important that the baby can take some of the oxygen that the mother is breathing and take it for itself, a little bit, and be able to function. And the CO2 and the oxygen transfer from the mother to the child by diffusion. So those are the important parts of this chapter for embryonic development. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, as always, put them below, and I'll see you in the next video.